Yes, hi everybody, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for a group poetry reading to celebrate Ananda Lina's new book of poems, Motherland. She's here with Omotara James, Susan Nguyen, and Alina Stefanescu. My name is Evan Karp. I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and a mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. Without further ado, I will introduce tonight's first author, Susan Nguyen. Hails from Virginia, but currently lives and writes in Arizona. She earned her MFA in poetry from Arizona State University, where she won the Aleda Rodriguez Memorial Prize and fellowships from the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing. In 2018, PBS NewsHour named her one of 3 women poets to watch. Her work appears in Diagram, Tin House, and elsewhere. She writes a lot about identity, the body, and the Vietnamese diaspora, and also likes to make zines. Her debut collection, Dear Diaspora, won the 2020 Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Poetry and was published by the University of Nebraska Press in September of this year, just out. I just want to say before, yes, thank you, Ananda, and welcome, Susan. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Evan, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for hosting us and helping us celebrate Ananda. I'm so excited, Ananda, to get to your part of the reading. I want to hear you read. And thank you everyone for joining us in this virtual space. I'm excited to be reading a handful of poems from Dear Diaspora. Really, this collection was just me trying to process what it means to be a member of specifically the Vietnamese diaspora. There's a lot of my own identity and familial history and culture that I didn't understand and actively pushed away for so much of my life. And I'm so happy that when I was ready to kind of start interrogating and dissecting that I had poetry to turn to just to help me work through that. And I'm still working through that. So I guess all I will really preface with, in terms of this collection, it follows Susie with an I, this fictionalized version of myself. So you'll probably hear some third-person poems, just Susie growing up, and then some first-person poems that kind of allow Susie to speak to and about the diaspora in a different way. So hopefully y'all will enjoy. So the first poem I'm going to read is called The First Language. 1. Behind the church, we ran through labyrinths of poplar and hickory, dirt paths cutting through ravines in the backs of suburban homes, their brick patios and striped furniture. In the green light of summer, we loved getting lost, how we could step into woods and exit in a cul-de-sac 8 blocks away. Loved it best when tadpoles formed a halo around our toes. 2. Before he disappeared, my father taught me how to catch tadpoles in my hand. The trick wasn't just to stay still, but to stop breathing. He caught dozens like this, knees bent and pant legs folded, his face inches above the creek. He taught me that our first language was named after tadpoles, the way they move through water, a knife dissecting the stratosphere, a voice cutting quiet. 3. My third favorite memory of him is walking hand in hand on 2-lane roads, identifying Virginia trees. In one pocket, a zodiac sign lighter, a button for mother's favorite blouse. In the other, acorns for burying. I can still identify the red oaks. 4. Today, the tadpoles flow through my fingers like an egg yolk, and my impulse is to cradle one in my mouth. The tadpole swims circles and my tongue follows, mapping its movement before spitting. The last time she saw him was after dinner washing the dishes. Her mother had brought home rice vermicelli soup and patty crabs. This wasn't her father's first disappearance. Sometimes Susie couldn't tell when he disappeared from when he left for fishing trips on the coast, when he stayed out all night and went to work after sleeping in the car or no sleep at all. But always he materialized in a few days or a week. From the broken down cardboard boxes and crushed pistachios in his car, $1 scratch-offs and green grass, emerged her father, dark and sinewy, mouth full of resin. So I'm in Arizona now, but as Evan mentioned earlier, I grew up and spent most of my life in Virginia. So this next poem is about cicadas. My memory of cicadas, the ones that come up every every 7 years. And I've said this before so many times, I can't tell if this was a real memory, if it's one of those things where you think and you say it and then like it has become a real memory, but I don't know if this actually happened. But I remember as a kid, like kids daring each other to eat cicadas when they came up because it was a big deal. I don't know if this actually happened, but I have a memory of this, so we'll say it did. A cicada summer. The cicadas come from the ground and enter the world in currents, streaming down tree trunks, over branches, across sidewalks and roads, the males pulsing their abdomens, singing for sex. In the fields behind the school, Susie and her classmates stand still as dozens climb over their bodies, careful not to crush the winged insects beneath their feet, fearful of littering the ground with broken glass. Susie collects every wing she can find. Each one becomes a small body of water she carries in her pocket, a broken window pane she holds to each eye. She counts dozens more on her way home and imagines how they would taste. Hands in her pockets, touching the wings to each fingertip, she wonders, would they still sing on the way to death? And would it sound any different? Today, she walks through uneven fields of green and spits into tall grass, the roots of trees, listens as the clicking of cicadas fills her body with song. The green lacerates her ankles, and she imagines her blood mixed with dirt will nourish, will add to the muscle tremor of the earth. I think I have time for maybe one or two more. My title of my collection, Dear Diaspora, comes from a series of poems I have dispersed throughout called Letter to the Diaspora that begins with Dear Diaspora. So I have a handful, and I'm going to read the first one that appears pretty early on in the collection. And the second line is crossed out. So that's what I mean by strike through. I haven't really figured out a better way to read that out loud. Letter to the Diaspora. Dear Diaspora, I believe in the American dream, strike through. Last night, I had the American dream. In the dream, I had an indoor pool. In the dream, I walked my dead dog with a diamond leash. I ate a greasy burger with my perfect hands. I had the most beautiful sex. My skin was smooth, alabaster as the moon. In the morning, everything had changed. There was no pool, only twine for drying clothes. The dead remained dead. My perfect hands held nothing. Nothing was better. All right, and I will just end it on one more poem. Let's see. My gosh, losing my pages, sorry. Sitting down with grief. She calls it anger, love, rapture, calls it cowardly, ecstatic. Heavy on the chair, grief does not reach the floor, hardly stirs. In its silence, she can hear her own tongue. She imagines grief's outline, hazy at best, an in-between color lit from within, like an ember of coal. Grief says little, yes, no, does not say where her father has gone, does not say how to speak the language of her mother. When it moves, she can feel the start of movement in herself. Two bodies tied to one another with a blade of grass. I think I'm going to end it there for tonight. Thank you so much. Excited to hear everyone else.
Thank you, Susan. That was Susan Nguyen, everybody. You can get copies of her book, Dear Diaspora, by clicking through the link just beneath the video, and I just dropped it in the chat also. Susan, I loved your poems. Thank you so much. I have very fond memories of catching tadpoles also myself, and thank you. Next up is Omotara James. Omatara is a multidisciplinary artist, writer, and editor. She's the author of the poetry collection Song of My Softening, forthcoming from Alice James Books in April of 2022, and the chapbook Daughter Tongue, which was selected by African Poetry Book Fund in collaboration with Akashic Books for the 2018 New Generation African Poets box set. Omatara, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited for your reading.
Thank you so much, Evan. I mean, what a time to be alive. Susan, that was beautiful. Really, I enjoyed your poems. And Ananda, congratulations. Congratulations, and another one. I really enjoyed reading your poems and just the range of theme and play with language. Poems about homeland, poems about grief, relationships. You really cover so much and bring such tenderness and attention. And I'm really grateful that your poems are out here in the world conjuring spells. And there's one poem in particular, Transa, in which the first couple of lines go, "My dreams are populated by places to which I cannot return." And I thought about those lines, like I couldn't escape those lines. And I think that as poets, that's so much of what we do. You know, we are looking for a return. We are writing in exile and looking for return. And oftentimes, if you wait long enough, what begins in exile will end in return, right? So I'm just going to read 3 poems that I believe to be in conversation with your wonderful work. And Alina, I can't wait to hear you later as well. And I'm grateful for this sisterhood tonight. Thank you. The first poem I'm going to read delves into concepts of girlhood and puberty and those constructs. It examines if they even really exist and what they are. Half girl, then elegy. Having fallen while no one was looking, having borne what fell through, having fallen early, having barely fallen through myself, my luck so close to catching, having caught the worst of it, having fallen from the sky and then through it, having landed to realize I had been part, having parted the late sky, partly sky where I am delicate. I took a tumble through the night bloom. I took the night with me as I tumbled delicate with the infinite, which swells from the tallest branch. Having grown swollen as low-hanging fruit, I tell Nadra I couldn't help it. The fresh heave of new breast, thick switch of hip, a group of unnamed gifts is called a steal. She says, fruit you can reach is still precious. Her name means rare. Her lean thins toward the unusual. In Lagos, we name our girls darling, sincere, precious, because a name is a stake in the grave. Having grieved and taken on the way to Eros Thanatos, having arrived late to my own bloom. Have me like a walnut, pry the part of me that is hollow from the part that yields fruit. This next poem I wrote after a breakup and during the processing that takes place. It's called Sonnet of the Bull, and the epigraph comes from an article in the Independent, which is as follows. A bull killed itself on a wooden post after being sent into a terrified frenzy when its horns were set on fire in front of a baying crowd. And this is the festival that takes place, the running of the bulls, Pamplona. Sonnet of the Bull. The only woman I ever loved came with an army of strangers to kill me. So I made myself a star, my pads cracking the cobbled streets free of the past. We began as two animals running free, but our fat days burned thin beneath the wide eye of grief. Had I not outpaced the delicate body of my birth, she might have never noticed me. Alas, one forgoes the rescue of love. When your lover is the matador and your soulmate the sunless rage. The chase, the only stroke of pleasure to part you with soft hands. Hot breath on the heels of your final gallop, then bam. Bull despairs amidst the frenzy and dies instantly. Death, a picture made of light, sings for me. Because love croons like a surprise torch of fire. Because love comes for your horns. Just really glad to be here again. And I'm so glad that we're writing during the same time and living. This last poem delves into grief, motherhood. I wrote it for Naya Rivera, who is an actress who died out on a lake during a swimming accident, mysteriously. So this poem is titled "To the Mother of the Boy Found Floating Asleep on the Lake," for Naya Rivera. Do not despair this motherless sail. Dear unsailed mother, your boy sleeps safe. Hands have found him, wrapped a blanket round. Just yesterday, he sailed through your earthly waters. You still the water and the hand that guides his route. Sleepy distance between love and land, between now and then. The break of death, never far, mother. Mother him from the lake of slumber into which he'll nightly plunge. The sailing sleep of death only parts you from your vessel, not your boy. Love is still the sailless voyage home. Thank you. Congratulations, Ananda.
Thank you so much, Omatara. That was so powerful. And I just wrote down so many lines, having fallen early, having caught, having landed to realize I had been part. I loved your poems. Thank you for sharing. Y'all, that was Omotara James. You can pre-order Song by Softening, which is out in April, by clicking through the link just beneath the video. And next up is Elena Stefanescu. Elena was born in Romania and lives in Birmingham, Alabama, with her partner and several intense mammals. Recent books include a creative nonfiction chapbook, Ribald, out from Bull City Press in series in November of last year. Her poetry collection, Door, won the Wandering Angels Press Prize in September of this year, just out. Alina's writing can be found or is forthcoming in diverse journals, including Prairie Schooner, North American Review, World Literature Today, Pleiades, Flock, Southern Humanities Review, Crab Creek Review, and others. She serves as poetry editor for Pigeonholes, poetry editor for Random Sample Review, poetry reviewer for Up the Staircase Quarterly, and co-director of PEN America's Birmingham chapter. It's kind of amazing she can make it here to be with us tonight. She's currently working on a novel, Like Creature. Alina, thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Hi, my internet connection is unstable. Can you all hear me? Am I shaky? Okay, good, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Let me know if I'm shaky at all, and I will pause. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm going to read a little bit from Dor, which is my book that came out in September. It's about growing up between Romania and the US, and growing up in a country which I call the Romanian Republic of Alabama, which was the house where we spoke Romanian and the space where everything was safe. And English for me is still the language of selling yourself, of getting the right to get citizenship, of it's a language of performance. And so there's this tension in me between intimacy, which I feel in Romanian, and selling myself, which I feel in English with my husband, ironically. I married an American, and his family doesn't like immigrants. And it's complicated. We've had, all of that is in Dor, but there's also Dor is the Romanian word for longing. And so there are different ways in which that sort of weaves in and out of this book. And I'm going to start with the starting poem from Dor, which is called Un-American Litany. And it's for your walls. Because I didn't hear how my parents fled Romania when purple clematis stole my attention, I bless the loss and the losingness now. Because the absence of certain stories haunts me, I bless my grandfather's microscope, crafted to observe the tiniest verbs we imagine, and flown in from Bucharest to rule our Alabama table, an alien resident with cabbaged accent. Because love can be a period costume, I bless the bodice of unforgiven slights that stiffens our bodies. Bless these undergarments worn to guise this longing towards being stripped from a lyric in Tom Waits's throat, or the random jawbone we never noticed in that part of the yard we left our clothes. In this heart of taking things off, and for the grace of your beard in a morning, I bless the pre-breakfast tantrum, the after-school scowl, the tucking in of all kinned mammals that bless us with demands for terrible fables, soft puppies, tinfoil crowns. I bless the bed that does not bless me with sleep. I bless the broken-wicked candle, bless the omnishambles of stars strangled by Birmingham lights. Because you return from work and failure fails to kill us, I bless the sidewalk with chalk, saying you, dear sidewalk, are a beautiful molehill of countless rejections, and scribble the rejectedness bright pink. Because the poem won't come, I bless the boots I've worn to stomp out of the house I've become, to hide from the mouse inside every story I've written, only to pause, turn back, bless this imminent rodent, the courage of its undesired presence, the persistence of its tiny scratchings, the valiance of its wall-crumbling teeth. I think I'm going to do one more from Dor, and then I'm going to read new stuff, which I always do, unpublished stuff. So this one is called Red Chair with Potential. And my mom died suddenly in her sleep when she was on a trip in Amsterdam. There was no pre-existing condition, no health. She just said, bye, I'll see you, and never woke up. And of an embolus, actually close to the time C.D. Wright died. And I'm still dealing with that. So this is Red Chair with Potential. I stared at the red chair until it turned into a boulder in a chestnut grove where dolls remove their clothes and cry. But first, It was a podium where the blonde Barbie pastor officiated a marriage of two moms. Then it was a hideout for horrible toothaches. Look, I don't believe my mom knew she was dying, or I need to prove none know the difference between dreaming and disappearing, its edges sunk like the angles of shipwrecks. The bottle near the boulder has no message. The chair is never a constellation. I give up on the moon, its promises, all boneless statements, meet. There is a mask inside a man on the bridge before dying. There is the water. There is a way falling goes on without us. Pretend it's the boulder. So now I'm going to read, maybe I have time to read Apologia. One interesting thing about living in Alabama is that everyone here wants to criminalize abortion. And one of the reasons my parents defected was because Ceausescu had criminalized abortion, birth control, and condoms. And I think people have heard about Romanian orphanages and seen some of the results, but it's strange to live in Alabama. So this is called Apologia or Apologia, which in Greek was sort of I disappeared for a minute. I did not respond when you called me. I wanted the death Alabama didn't offer. I did not want the local D&C option. I refused the twilight sedation, the succor of a specialist doing the deed for me. I have no excuse for what I needed, to be guilty. After visiting a former lover in Manhattan, I went to Liberty Clinic, swallowed the first pill, its origins French, as the famous green statue. I used Mountain Dew to swallow the final pill on the train for Coney Island. I say Coney when I mean destination, the termination of pregnancy, the train ending in a carnival, apart. The gulls witnessed everything. I stood on the boardwalk, marveling, dumbstruck by dizziness as something left this body, its warmth flooding my jeans. My hands shook like toy airplanes. No doula or doctor or nurse or friend intervened. No expert stood between my breath and the sky, my breath and the clouds clotting, my breath and the unwanted baby, my life and the blood on my hands. The certain solace, a choice I made with myself. I did it all. I did everything. I wore the silver mermaid necklace for years, a souvenir. So I'm gonna leave Dor, I'm gonna leave the happy Dor space now and go to some newer stuff. This is really recent. It's called, there's a billboard when you drive on the interstate called it says on it 1-800-MY-SOUTH. And it was created by the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I had a long conversation with the son about it and about what My South means and how My South, we really hope My South gets bigger. So we're here for that. This is the poem. 1-800-MY-SOUTH. Call me, says the declarative red on the 30-foot billboard. My son reads it aloud, says it must have cost the Sons of Confederate Veterans a shit ton of money to lay this hot take on a major road. My biggest regret, said my Romanian grandfather, was being a vet, getting laureled for the worst I had been. He said this in the state where heritage quilts are soft gauntlets laid over sleeping children. The kindred of the killing is the kind. Forgetting is a crime against the person we buried, my father said. Violence is intimate as the child spanked for crying, preemptive as the gun hung over a threshold. Someone loved you enough to whip you with love, its scruffy paws on the carpet, the stench of its piss on the floor. I almost called it to find out more. And I'm going to end with Epiphania, and a huge thanks to Ananda for having me, and so much love to Omatara and Susan for the incredible poems that they read tonight. Epiphania is think the Greek word for epiphany. I have been done by bright offerings and trios of kings. I have been offered free van rides in return for a blowjob. I have been blessed, boggled, bowled over by the luscious goodness of strangers selling popsicles and tracts in dark alleys. I told off your mom, her sister, and your brother's wife in the name of the Father's Son. When the blackbird shatters its head against the window near our bed, when the flight falters, fumbles, fails, and the winged thing is dead, I shall be quiet as a triumvirate. I have been the bird, the paned glass, the grass holding the fallen carcass. We kill ourselves trying to see the thing beyond the thing we have been done by, the brightness. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alina. That was wonderful. I bless the bed that does not bless me with sleep also. Thank you. Also, I'm from Savannah, Georgia, and am fairly familiar with the whole area. So many peculiar billboards. Thank you so much. That was Alina Stefanescu, you guys, and you can order Door by clicking through the link just beneath the video. So next up, we have Ananda Lima, the reason for our gathering tonight. Congratulations to you, Ananda, for Motherland. And thank you all so much for being here. This has been so wonderful. If I were a doctor, I would prescribe this poetry to everyone. I will actually prescribe it anyways. It's probably not the right verb. Okay, I'm just going to get out of the way and introduce Ananda. Ananda's poetry collection, Motherland, it's just out from Black Lawrence Press, is the winner of the Hudson Prize. She's also the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Ambulopia, which was out from Bull City Press in 2020, in translation from Paper Nautilus in 2019, a fiction chapbook, Tropicalia, from Newfound this year in 2021, and a poetry and photography chapbook, Vigil, from Get Fresh Books, also 2021. Her work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, Poets.org, Kenyon Review Online, the Birmingham Poetry Review, Gulf Coast, and elsewhere. She has an MA in linguistics from UCLA and an MFA in creative writing and fiction from Rutgers University, Newark. Ananda, thank you so much for bringing all these wonderful poets here together tonight, and for joining us, and congratulations again on the book. I'm so excited for your reading.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and thank you all for these amazing, beautiful, gorgeous poems. Usually, I get nervous, which I am now, but I forgot all about it, So now I'm like, oh, wait, I have to read, because that was so beautiful. And, that is, when I put this together, I was like, I can do this, if they say yes, so this is just super dreamy to have you all here. I'll read some poems from Motherland, and I'll try to respond a little bit to the poems that were read tonight, and some more just to do with the collection. And I'll start with this poem called Arroyo, and some background on it. I was at a party at some point talking to somebody. I think it was an AWP party, maybe, I don't know. But we were talking about how like the letter A is like a cow, like a bull or a cow's head, like a carcass. And so this refers to that. And I think that's the rest is just what it is. Okay, so Arroyo. They say the first letter of my name evolved from a picture of a carcass, a cabeça de vaca sem as suas costelas expostas like claws or jaws, ancient. My neighbor says not to let my son sleep on my bed, but I do. I know the terror. At night, we're haunted by my great, 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 great grandparents, dry on the cracked soil, beating in the cold of my feet, na Bahia, in my bones. In their bones, they inhabit on my bed. Sorry. In America, I learned that arroyos are paths carved by the rain, but I already knew. At night, The cracked soil calls for me as cabezas de vaca of my greats, calling and calling. I tell them, I don't know you, but I do. The city's spine is a split bifurcation solidified in calcium. In America, they eat the bagasse of oranges and say my name means bliss. I am in love with bone white concrete. The spine of the city sits fleshless and free of scales, flexible bones that can bend and bend and bend and keep bending and bending right up until they snap. All right. See, I think I was haunted when I was reading this one because I messed up so many lines when I was talking about my haunters. Great. So this next poem, I feel like it's almost like a sister poem to that poem that I just read. But this one I read almost in every reading, because the one that I'm going to read now, because I think it captures so much the themes of the collection. Not all of them, but it touches a lot of the other poems. And it's called Line. I inherited from my mother the knobbly joints and square ends of my fingers. From my father, I got the habit of biting my nails. Their shortness, the frayed missing skin had never bothered me. But now I have a son, and he has begun to bite too. In America, I learned that I can snap a rubber band against my wrist each time my hand reaches up toward the mouth. On the back of my hand, the rubber band disappears into the color of my skin. But when I turn and face the inner side, it is a clear division of my body. The first time I saw a cotton tree, I found it beautiful. The cotton so white in its brown cradle, so soft against the square tips of my fingers. I squeezed the dead flower around it and felt joy from hearing it crackle. As children, we had cups full of sugarcane. We chewed on it and spit out the bagasse. Toothless men ran the knobbly stalks through a machine. The juice trickled into our glasses, and the flat piece that came out on the other side was put through it again until everything was gone. The dry split stalk thrown into a pile, limp like blonde hair. When I first arrived in America, I didn't understand what people meant when they said with an American accent that they were Irish or Italian or French. Now that I understand, I asked my mother for a family tree. She said she had never thought of such things, and she wouldn't know much past her grandmother's first name. So what I have is my memory of the faces of my relatives and my own. When I first arrived in America, all I could see was beauty. The snow, fine like sugar, white like cotton, but now the beauty, the land, the tired metaphors just make me sad. Before I left for America, I saw an individual in the mirror, but today I see my father, my mother, my brothers, my son, and a man missing skin from tears on his back, and the man who did it. When I looked this morning, I tugged on my rubber band so hard that it broke. So that is Line. All right, so I think I'm going to find that poem that Omatara mentioned because that was so lovely. Thank you so much, Tranza. And Tranza, 19. So Tranza is my favorite album. Just like from the I think it's 78 or 79. And my mom had it, and it was the singer Caetano Veloso was in exile when he did that album, and I just love it. It's beautiful. And this is Tranza. My dreams are populated by places to which I cannot return. Parades, people splashing water under the sun at high noon, at the edge of rivers Jaguadosi, where the washerwomen carry their loads on their heads, walking away from the water towards the shade of short, twisted trees that never shed leaves, but give cocoa or pequi or cashews, by which I mean the whole fruit with the juicy flesh that hangs from the nut. But here I hear my voice and I sound too much like myself, too much like Caetano, my tongue wrapped in plastic, clumsy as it rolls cold bites of this language in my mouth, never able to truly taste them, while my son in the back seat gorges himself. Okay, so I'm going to read. And since, Alina is here and we both did both city press chaps very close to each other. And then Susan also mentioned this memory that you don't know if it's a real thing, So I'll read this poem that is in my Bow City, I don't know, almost twin chapbook with Alina. And it's called Zoological circa 1982. We were little and we wore white. We squinted at all that light. We were hungry. We were given pink candied popcorn. We licked our fingers at the hot air and heavy with water, licked our sugar fingers, the hot and heavy with water agua doce, everything infused in sunlight in a tinge of purple. And I don't know if what I recall is that day, a blend of different days, or a photograph. I remember the sky burned white behind us in a picture, but I also see it big and bright blue, pierced by spikes on top of the fences that kept us away from the animals, but let their sweet musk through to reach us. The zoo looked so huge to me then, and when I went back with my son, I was surprised that it was still huge, but now rendered sharp in high contrast, the vivid Ipe greens and yellows of my Nikon D4S, viewed each time as just taken, pixels as bright in a future device as on the back of my camera, I now show my son chewing with his pink candid mouth. I no longer have that old photo of us dressed in white, and sometimes I wonder if there was a picture in the first place, or if some of it happened only in poetry, the purple imposed by a memory that learned to see itself, filtered in flare. Back home at my parents', we look at the photographs of me as a child. Now I find her beautiful. She looks like my son, and I like my mother. Sorry, I think I went over time and that was perfect. Thank you. And yeah, thank you so much, all of you. This was really beautiful.
One more.
I already went over. Sorry, I think I got distracted. Thank you.
What if there are other requests for one more?
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
All right. I'll do a very short one just so that it's not awkward. There you go. And this one, I think I may not have ever read it, maybe, I don't know, in public. This is called Minute, and it's a found poem. Minute. What is inside red? What is inside green? What is inside me? What is earth? Is earth in grandma's house? What is a minute? Are minutes for cooking? Is the daytime nighttime for the moon? That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananda. I'm gonna put us in galleries so everybody can see all of you guys. Thank you all so much for your lovely, wonderful poems. I feel so much better than I did before this event. And I want to thank you again, Ananda, for bringing all of these poets together and for joining us tonight. For those of you who are tuned in, you can get all of the books, click through the links beneath the video, and we'll send them right to you, or you can pick them up in San Francisco if you're local to the store. Let me just check the chat. Lots and lots of love for you guys. It looks like we don't have any audience questions. Did y'all want to discuss anything amongst yourselves, or any final words? I know, yeah.
I think I just want to say thank you all so much. And, I have these wonderful books, and I'm just, one coming up next year that I'm very excited. And your work is just amazing, and you're all so lovely and brilliant. And thank you Booksmith and everyone for having us.
Thank you. Can I ask Ananda, and anyone can answer this question, but especially during the pandemic, I've been writing a lot of my poems at home, but I was just wondering for this collection, what, I don't know exactly from what time period you wrote it, but I was just wondering, just in terms of place, were there particular places that you just found it easier to write? Like, do you write at home, or do you voyage elsewhere for inspiration, or do you have any kind of routines that can be associated with the making of this book?
I love that question because it's so relevant usually, but now it really makes us think because we've been trapped for a bit, right? But this book took a long time, so there's a long span, and my boy shows up, but in very different stages of growing up, and I wrote a lot of it in New Jersey, New York, but some Chicago poems made it in the end, just made it, which was very sweet. I like that. But I write a lot of home, but because, especially when my son was littler, it was just always so chaotic, and the time at home is so unprotected, I take a lot of notes, and it was just very random places. The car, the bathroom, now he's 10, so it's so much easier. He reads books, I'll go read a book, so everybody's happy. So now I have a desk. I don't write a lot on the desk, but I do it sometimes, which never happened before, but very, very varied and random places. I think now a little bit more at home is happening, more stable now. What about everybody else?
I had more questions. I wrote a question for each of you, which I don't know if y'all are comfortable with that, or if we have time for it, but I definitely have this question. Evan says yes, but is that okay with you? I'm going to start with Susan. I was really compelled. I too spent a lot of my younger days and my teen days feeling really ashamed of my country of origin and the language that we spoke all the time, because my mom did not care. And you mentioned that, and I'd like to know what brought you closer, what brought you back, or what brought you to write about it, to see its importance, and how whether that relationship is a reclamation or something in poetry, something more complicated, as sort of a new place entirely, almost.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. I don't know if you felt this way, but at some point, it was just very uncomfortable, right? I think I referred to it as cognitive dissonance. I don't know if that would be the right term for it, but after spending so much time pushing parts of my identity away, at some point it was okay, I don't really understand my identity, or there's a huge emptiness or absence that is my identity, right? It led me to kind of ask questions that maybe I wouldn't have thought to ask when I was younger, for whatever reason, right? I think things that made me feel foreign or othered, right? When I was younger, it was okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna be American and not worry about all that, or not ask questions. And at some point I realized there's so much so much history, and a lot of it is, painful too, of course, but I realized it was important for me to know and understand, and for me preserve and record some of that too. And some of that is recorded, and some of it got turned into art and poetry. I think it's something I'm still trying to figure out in my writing for sure. And I think this was a good start, I guess, in terms of like the research that was even involved in the writing project.
Omatara, I had a question for you. I loved the naming. I love the poem where you mentioned the names.
Half Girl and Elegy. Yeah.
Yes, I loved that. And there's something so intimate about it, and something so, I guess, un-American in all the ways that I kind of love and I'm compelled by. And I was wondering if you could pick a name in that vein, what would your name, sort of this
if I were like renaming myself or kind of reimagining.
Yes, if you were reimagining it, I know that's a weird question, but there was something so like you mentioned the grave and the names we carry. There's something so talismanic or almost
right, like The Conjuring definitely
right.
Is taking place there. That's a great question. What name would I choose for myself? I think if I were naming myself, I don't know how melodic this would be, but maybe Reckoning, or no, Undoing, maybe? Like, there's this quote which haunts me because I don't remember the name of the Latino poet who said it, but he wrote, "The poet is the undoing of the family." And that is something that has like haunted my work for a great while. And I'm like trying to find that quote again. And I definitely feel like in my case, where my parents have very like pragmatic official jobs, but then if you go back to like before my parents, there are artists recognized and unrecognized on each side. There's this kind of, I do feel like I've borrowed the skill set of, ancestors, and I am kind of in some ways undoing the work of kind of confirmation. Like there's like a conforming right that my parents had to do to feel safe, to be accepted, to live, to exist, for their lives to be sustainable. And I, those sacrifices of capitalism and patriarchy, like without those, okay, like the work that I do wouldn't be possible, right? So I'm very much connected and indebted to them in that way. So it's kind of ironic that, I think it's ironic, someone else might think it's a pain in the butt, but it's kind of ironic that now the work that I'm doing does in some ways undermine the work that they've done, but also it celebrates it. Like it's also intricate, it's also connected, and there's no direct line. So in many ways, I think many of my elders would agree that I am an undoer. So it's not the same as precious, but I think it tracks more accurately. Thank you for the question.
I love that. I love that. And I think there's so much rebuilding in undoing. I think there's so much affirming of humanity, even in the parents who did the more conventional thing. I don't know. I like thinking of it that way. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Ananda, the way that your family and the faces of your family, again and again, family members that appear sort of painted over the speaker's body in the poems, and was haunting to me, and I could almost feel it. I almost felt it palpably, even in the landscape, like this sort of motion between. And I was wondering, because I couldn't stop thinking about your son, or the son in the story, and because I too, when the when they say they're afraid, I bring them in my bed because I know what it's like to be afraid. And I know they're right to be afraid. It's scary that the world is not what we think, right? And I was wondering how poetry has, if motherhood has changed poetry for you, and now at the age where you are now, how that relates to your views of your parents and poetry in general. Right.
That is such a, thank you for all the questions for everybody. I loved all of those. And mine too, it's like so perceptive. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, so I think motherhood really changed. I think both, it coincided, the stage where I was in my writing was changing anyways, but it changed because for me there was so much at once that was very big, and I'm sure other experiences that are not motherhood can be that for different people, but it was just, you know, before I could, and I can, you know, there's a lot of joy in poetry, in, you know, look at the little moment and the little thing, and you know, making art out of that, and that's beautiful. But I just had so much that was so big at the same time, and it changed my experience of immigration a lot, right? So there's so many different stories even here in this room, right? Like so, you know, sometimes people come with their kids, but I came here single. I didn't really know if I was going to stay or not, you know, and I was staying, but, you know, I had lived other places before. And even when it was permanent, it was a very different relationship I had to here, to the US. So these changes happened at the same time. So there was a lot of big things, as well as just understanding that experience of motherhood. I was not a person who grew up like thinking, oh, I'm gonna have the day I have my kids. It never entered my mind until I decided to have a kid and had them, you know. So it was a lot. And then also changed it changed in a similar way my relationship to the US, to the present and past of the US, because it's almost like a backward lineage thing, you know, like now the US's history is my history via him somehow. And also my relationship to my family, the history in Brazil, I was much more, things were much more taken for granted, I think, you know. And now it's kind of like I feel all these things. I always think about how they relate to him as well as how they relate to me. So I think it became, there was a lot of big things that were constant, whereas before I was seeing little things that were important, but it wasn't this massive thing that I will always be tackling now. Love that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is like immensely disorienting and weird. I never wanted kids either, but I love my kids more than anything. And I can't breathe by how overwhelmed I am by them, by that love sometimes. And
it's overwhelming.
Yeah. And by the challenges of it, like not having space to exist on your own. Those are real, you know. So thank you for speaking to that, and yeah, and for your poetry, for all of this.
Thank you all. I'm willing to just hang out as long as you guys want to hang out. Thank you for those questions, Lena. And thank you all for your generous answers and for your time tonight, and for your poetry, of course. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Get the books. If you haven't already, you're sleeping, don't do that. I hope to see you all again soon. And yeah, follow these poets into the future. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Congrats
much.
again, Ananda.
Thank you so much. This was beautiful. Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Okay.